I am your host, Dawn Taylor, and today I get to talk to the lovely Sam. Sam is what is Sam? Sam, by the way, has the greatest accent on the planet. Sam Alexandra Rose is a writer from Northamptonshire, UK. I'm really trying to read that right, but it's an amazing name. She is a three-time cancer survivor that has a rare genetic condition and a PhD student researching the connection between writing creative writing, sorry, and cancer survivorship, which in and of itself is crazy. Her poetry and her prose have been published in over 70 literary magazines and anthologies. And her memoir, Gut Feelings, Coping with Cancer and Living with Lynch Syndrome, was released in January 2021. So if you want to find any of these things or access to Sam, please check out our show notes. And I'll mention that again at the end, but check out our show notes because you want to follow her. She works as a patient and public involvement manager for a bowel disease research charity. And she is here today to open up and to talk about a topic we wish people talked about. And honestly, something that both of us have dealt with and are dealing with is, but we should be dead. And how do you live in that situation? So, Sam, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You are so welcome. So, what do you wish people talked about?
I really wish that people talked more about the realities of cancer survivorship and living with this genetic condition and how that makes us just the ways that we try to cope with that reality, in terms of, as you said, how long am I going to be here for, being just so what's the word? I've lost my words already. Being
That's
so
okay.
Sorry, the word is totally gone.
That's okay.
Impulsive. Ironically, the word was impulsive.
Yeah.
And impatient about everything, and yeah, just trying to kind of merge the two worlds of like the normal everyday world and the medical world that a lot of people don't know about.
Oh, 100%. So, my husband and I often joke that we live in a town called realistic denial because we still have to live in reality of the fact that we have conditions that could kill us tomorrow, that we are living on borrowed time, all of these things. But we also have to live in this weird state called denial because we still have to be human and we still have to get out of bed every day and go to work and function and live and not live in that identity. So let's start at the beginning for you. So, three-time cancer survivor. Talk to us about that. How old were you? When did you get diagnosed? What is it you were diagnosed with? All the fun.
Okay. So I was first diagnosed with bowel cancer or colon cancer at the age of 22 back in 2010. And after I was diagnosed with bowel cancer, my consultant was like, well, why has this happened to you so young? We need to do some genetic testing on me, on my parents, to find out what was going on.
Yeah.
And it turned out that my parents have a genetic condition called Lynch syndrome, which actually isn't very rare. But the thing is that a lot of people, apparently around 95% of people, don't actually know that they have it, which is crazy to think that people are wandering around with this gene. Essentially,
Wow.
it increases your cancer risk for various types of cancer. Mostly it's colon cancer, and it can increase your risk of colon cancer to up to 80%.
Holy cow, that is a big number.
It is.
And the majority of people have no idea.
No, no. A lot of people probably haven't even heard of it, even those that have
No.
it, probably.
So, okay, so really quick, because I'm like, what? I could have this and not know about it. How do you even get tested for this?
So if your family has a high kind of number of instances of people with bowel cancer or different other types of cancer, so it's bowel cancer, like gynecological cancers like womb cancer,
Hmm.
and some others as well. It kind of depends on which genes are involved.
Yeah.
But I actually when I went one step further, and so what happened to me was I inherited Lynch syndrome from both of my parents, which is a really rare thing to do. And actually, they estimate that only 1 in a million people have this condition. So what it is you inherit Lynch syndrome from both of your parents. So it's like the odds of getting two people with Lynch syndrome together to begin with, who then have a kid who then has the bad luck of inheriting Lynch syndrome, not just from one parent, because you could potentially not inherit it from any of the parents, like my sister did. She doesn't have Lynch syndrome or what I have at all. But yeah, so what I ended up with was something called CMMRD, or constitutional mismatch repair deficiency, which is a bit of a mouthful. But as you can imagine, if Lynch syndrome increases your cancer risk, then having it from both parents increases your cancer risk even further. And that also involves things like brain cancer and brain tumors. And we found out actually that my brother also had CMMRD, but we didn't realize at the time. So he died when he was 16. I was 1 year old, back in 1989. So we know now that that was because of CMMRD as well.
Wow. Okay, there's so much we could unpack there. I can't imagine being your parents and knowing that genetically this is something that they gave you. And I don't mean that in a blame or anything like that, but I know my husband and myself, like both of us having conditions that were genetic, that was one of our reasons. And when we realized we couldn't have kids on our own, we didn't want to do a surrogate. We didn't want to use our DNA. It was because we were like, I would never want to give this to somebody. Right. And so,
Yeah.
like, there's so many. Okay, I don't know where you're willing to go with this, but there's so many
I'll
directions.
go anywhere. I'm totally
There's so
open.
many directions. So, okay, so let's like start there is right off the bat, like, how have your parents dealt with the fact that they know that it was like their genetics that has not caused this, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
How
So
have they dealt with that?
I mean, we don't really talk about that side of it too much as a family, but I do know that they do feel some kind of guilt, which of course isn't rational or anything, because
Not at
nobody
all,
can
but
help
yeah.
what they pass on. But yeah, I think they do feel like a bit of guilt over that, but it's not really something that we talk about or dwell on too much. I think
No.
we take things in our stride. Whatever happens, we just get on with it, really.
Yeah. And so for your sister who doesn't have this,
Mhm.
does she live in fear of it at all? Is there a way she could develop it at some point? Is she
No.
higher risk? Or she's just healthy and good to
Yeah,
go?
she's just fine, which is, I mean, she's got two children as well, which is great because it means that she didn't get it, and therefore she didn't pass it on
Yeah.
to my niece and nephew as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is wild. So, what has your journey looked like having Lynch syndrome? You got cancer very young, right?
Yeah.
Incredibly young. And what has your journey continued to look like?
Yeah, so I had that first cancer. I had my entire colon removed, which meant I had a stoma. I had, like a colostomy bag
Yeah.
for 5 months, just a temporary one. And then what they can do is, I always think that the science of it is quite cool. They can do a reversal in some cases. So what
Mm-hmm.
they did is they kind of put the stoma kind of back in essentially, and they make a makeshift large intestine out of a part of your small intestine, and that learns to like absorb fluid in the way that a large intestine would, which I think is
Oh,
pretty clever.
wow.
So yeah, it's like essentially plumbing me back together, so I'm kind of normal again,
Yeah.
or as normal as I can be. um so yeah, so that was in 2010, and then 2011 I had the reversal. Later in 2011 we had the genetic testing, and then that meant that I had to have all kinds of tests every year because I'm so much higher risk. So it's things like something called a flexible sigmoidoscopy, which is similar to a colonoscopy, but because I don't have a colon anymore, obviously it doesn't go quite that far up. So it's like a mini colonoscopy, really.
Yeah.
I have a gastroscopy every year, which is the camera down the throat and into the stomach and looking at the small bowel.
Yeah.
I had a CT scan once a year for just like 5 years. I think that was just like related to surgery more than anything else. And a capsule endoscopy I have at the moment, and these that sort of came later. But the capsule endoscopy is when you swallow like a little camera, like a little sort of tablet, and you wear a recording device that speaks to it, and the camera like travels down your throat and into your stomach and small bowel, and eventually like during the day you like poop it out basically. They don't want it back, they're very clear. They don't want it back.
That is really funny.
So yeah, it's like a less invasive way to have a look at like your small bowel and kind of the parts that the colonoscopy can't find. So I had several years of all of these tests and kind of the fear of recurrence that comes with it and all of that sort of stuff. And then in 2018, I had my annual routine gastroscopy. Around the same time, I had an MRI to look at a completely unrelated problem. I was getting recurring abscesses down below, to put it politely. So I had an MRI. But when they looked at the MRI, we never heard about the abscesses again, basically, because what they saw was a problem. I can't exactly remember how they described it, but they said there was a problem with the lining of my womb. And all of this kind of happened at the same time. And the gastroscopy that I went to, they said that they found a polyp. They marked it as urgent. A polyp, I should say, is just like a little sort of growth, like a tumor type thing that may or may not be cancerous. Some polyps are just benign. But they said that they found it and they'd sent it off for testing, marked urgent. So you can already tell, well, that's not a very good sign. We went on a family holiday, came back to loads of like voicemail messages from the hospital. Can you call us? And essentially I kind of got two cancer diagnoses within 2 days of each other, which, as you can imagine, was just absolutely horrendous. So
I can't even imagine. Yeah.
it was awful. So I had to meet my consultant at the hospital, and they said go meet him on the ward because he isn't, in his office where he would normally be, because it's not part of his sort of consulting hours, which again, bad sign. And he said, yeah, you have duodenal cancer. So the duodenum is a small part of the small bowel. And I was kind of expecting it because they said, the gastroscopy, we've taken something, we've marked it as urgent for testing. So I was weirdly calm about it. Because I was sort of expecting it. Yeah. What I wasn't expecting was the next day at my gynecology appointment for them to say, you have definitely precancerous and possibly cancerous cells in your womb. And then they later confirmed that it was cancer. And then they were very surprised that I was relieved that it was that it was early stage cancer, because they said it's either pre-cancer or it's early cancer. Yeah. And in my head, I was thinking, but what if they're wrong? What if it's actually stage 3, stage 4? Your mind just like goes into overdrive. So when they said to me it's early stage cancer, I was like, oh, okay, good. I'm not good, but
And they're like, wait a sec. That reaction's not what we were expecting.
What's wrong with you? Yeah. But it's like, well, whether it's precancerous or it's cancerous, you have to do something about it anyway. So what difference does it make? So yeah. Crazy. So after that, my partner and I went to a fertility consultant to talk about options. They said that you could have surgery now, like have everything removed, womb, ovaries, because there was a risk of ovarian cancer as well. Do all that now and get it done, or there's this other treatment that may or may not work. Can't remember the details of it now. and you might want to do this, or you might want to hold off surgery if you want to try and like get pregnant first, or if you want, because we didn't have biological children.
Yeah.
Or they said that you could freeze your eggs, but in order to do that, they would be stimulating the ovaries, which could also stimulate the lining of the womb, which could
Yeah.
in turn cause the cancer to grow. So me and my partner kind of immediately both agreed, well, we don't want to do any of that.
Yeah.
Yes, we kind of envisaged ourselves having children at some point, but we were on the same page that we both didn't want to take a risk. So we just said, yeah, okay, total hysterectomy, just do it now, get rid of
Yeah.
everything. So that's what we ended up doing in September 2018. And then they said, once you've recovered from your hysterectomy, we will do a Whipple surgery to deal with the duodenal cancer. And this was all quite a long time coming, because that summer was very much two teams kind of fighting over me and trying to decide what they were going to do with me, because I was quite an unusual case. So in November, they did the Whipple surgery, which was removal of the head of the pancreas, the duodenum, because that's where the cancer was, the bile duct, and the gallbladder. So it's quite a big operation. They normally do it for pancreatic cancer. And it was about an 8-hour surgery. 2 hours of that was just like dealing with adhesions, when like organs get like stuck together, they have to prise them apart before they can do anything with them. And that was 2 days, I think, in the high dependency unit at the hospital, sort of similar to the ICU, and then another 7 days in a regular ward. So yeah, really difficult to recover from. But that in November, that will be 5 years ago, and I will hopefully be 5 years cancer free if nothing happens between now and then.
So okay, for starters, holy shit. Okay, I'm just gonna say it because everyone's thinking it. To deal with all of this at such a young age, and then dealing with these massive decisions, cancers that are not like, it's not common to recover from some of these cancers, right? But then in the middle of that, you're fighting for your own life. You're fighting with, like, can I have kids? Can I not have kids? Making that decision to make that final that you couldn't have birth children, right? Like, there's so many parts and pieces of this.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so many parts. So before we dive into that, what are the risks or the chances of you getting cancer again?
I don't really know, and I try not to think about it too much. Some things you just don't want to Google, I think.
Oh, I can totally see that. I do want to say, for anyone who's like, okay, how rare is this Lynch syndrome? What, like, this is crazy. According to the Cleveland Clinic in the States for cancer, Lynch syndrome occurs in approximately 1 in 279 individuals in the United States. So just think about that number for a second. Like, I'm amazed that more people aren't being tested for this. But also, no, I'm going to talk to my doctor and ask if I can be tested for this, because that's just wild. So now let's move forward a few years. You're recovering from 3 cancers in a very short period of time. And now it's time to live again. And something that you and I had talked about in our initial conversation before recording this today was that feeling of the life you thought you were going to have died. And I think anyone who's had any sort of massive health issue, anyone who's had anything in their life not go according to plan, understands very much what that feels like. But when you're faced with death, it's very different, right? So when you're in a position where you could die and you're literally fighting for your life with medical treatments, it's hard to live after. It can be incredibly difficult to actually live after. Let's dive into that.
I think it's difficult both in the long term and in the short term as well, because you have the long term of maybe life not turning out how you thought it would. So for
Yeah.
example, the not being able to have biological children, but then
Yeah.
also you have in the short term just trying to live day to day, especially when, okay, so the cancer may be gone, all three of them,
Yeah.
but there's still the yearly testing that I have to have, all those different tests, and more have been added as well because of the CMMRD. So I also have now a brain and full body MRI. So every
Yeah.
6 months I have a brain MRI, and every year I have full body MRI as well. And it's just that trying to live day to day when you get an appointment letter through the door saying, come to see us for an MRI, come to see us for this capsule endoscopy, and also you have to drink bowel prep, which is completely disgusting if
Oh,
you
if
haven't
it's
had it.
anything like it is in Canada, it's awful. Yeah.
It's horrible. And that's like a 3-day affair, right? So you have
Yeah.
the bowel prep that you have to drink the day before, and then you go to the appointment on the day. And then if you have sedation for your procedure, then you can't like drive for 24 hours afterwards. It is basically a 3-day thing. And I'm just remembering when I had one at the beginning of this year, I did the bowel prep and I really wasn't feeling well. And I was thinking, bowel prep doesn't really usually make me feel this bad. Woke up the next morning, I feel absolutely awful. Got to go to the hospital like as soon as I wake up, basically. Did a COVID test. I had COVID for the
Oh
first
gosh.
time, and I drunk the bowel prep for no reason.
Sorry,
I was
I
like,
shouldn't laugh, but having been there, I'm like, oh my gosh. Nobody wants to do bowel prep for no reason. No one.
no, I can laugh about it now, but yeah,
Hmm.
just remembering that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's this whole thing of, you know, tests may crop up at any time, and say you're at work, you're just sat at your desk doing your job, and then you have a phone call. You know, come in, make an appointment, or you're waiting for results, and it's just always at the back of your mind. So
Yeah,
it's, yeah, the short term and the long term, I think.
absolutely. Have you struggled with letting people close to you? I know one of my struggles was I was so terrified that people would know me or like me or love me, and then I would die. Or that I was too much for people because of health issues, right? Where it was like, you know what? I don't want anyone else to have to be part of this. I don't want anyone else to have to be in the hospital or worrying about me or driving me for tests or surgeries or any of those things. And I don't know if this is the correct wording on it, but it almost became like a weapon for me over the years of just like holding people at an arm's length,
Mm.
right? Because it really felt like if I let you too close, this is just going to get hard. And then either you're going to reject me and abandon me down the road, or you're going to lose me, or something's going to happen and I'm going to get hurt. And that makes no sense. And I don't want to do that.
I think
Right.
I'm Yeah, I think I'm really lucky in that my partner and I have been together for a really long time. So
Yeah.
we met in 2006 at university. So we'd been together about 4 years before my first cancer diagnosis.
Yeah.
We're still together now, and he's brilliant. Um, but I mean, the thing that upsets me the most, if I think about it too much, is like, what if I something does happen again,
Yeah.
and it's the worst outcome, and then I have to leave him? And that's just the thought of him having to manage with me not being here. That is the most upsetting thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Has it has it changed? So my partner and I also, my husband and I have been together since way before the aneurysm, right? And he also is brilliant and stuck it out. You and I both chose very well. But what about with friends?
Yeah, it's complicated, I think.
Mhm.
um sometimes I think that people were my friends maybe a little bit more while I was unwell.
Mhm.
And then once you're kind of okay and, well, they think that you're okay and recovered, then there's that drop in attention. And especially after my first diagnosis and my surgery, I spent a few years just feeling so sad about everything that had happened, afraid of what was going to happen next. And I guess I really still needed people several years later to check on me and say, are you, emotionally okay? Because I was not. But people don't know that, which I guess is what spurs me on to do things like come here and talk to you,
Yeah.
because people need to know that people who have had cancer or other illnesses, it takes its emotional toll, and you got to check in on people.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the emotional toll isn't immediate. I know for myself, it always hits later,
Yeah.
right? So I'll recover from whatever I'm going through. Say I'm feeling amazing in April or May. Typically, it's like a 4 months later. My cycle's 4 months. And it's like 4 months later is when I'm like, blah. And I feel like that's when I fall apart. And that's when I really, really struggle. And yeah, people that haven't, okay, so this is something interesting because I've had this conversation recently with some friends is if you haven't been through it, yay, glad you haven't dealt with really traumatic health issues. Right? But you also just don't understand. Like you don't get it and there's no way you can. But also from the side of the person who's dealing with a health issue, we need to step up and go, this is what I need from you. But part of that is also, can you provide that? Right? Like, do you have the capacity? Do you have the capacity to provide what it is I need in that area? Right? And I've had friends over the years that are phenomenal at the like, hey, I need you to call me on like every Friday and be like, are you alive? Are you good? Right? And they're like, done. They'll put it in their calendars and like that works for them. And other people, it's like, hey, can you not ever talk to me about my health? Can every conversation we have nothing to do with my health? Because I really just need to not think about it right now. And they'll be like, yep, absolutely. To people that go, hey, you're not well. I know when I was doing some really, really heavy treatments about 2 years ago, I was in Edmonton a lot and people didn't know I was here. There were a few core people in my life that knew I was here. And it was very interesting how one of guys, there was one night he called me and he your IVs. And I was like, I'm just done now. Like, I'm just on my way home. And he's like, come to my house. And I was like, no, I don't have the energy. And he's like, no. He's like, we're going to feed you. We're going to tuck you on the couch on a blanket. And you get to just lay there and just not be alone, but we'll ignore you. And
Love that.
I don't know if I've ever told him how much that meant to me, right? That it was like, no, no, you don't have to show up in any way. You can show up in your pajamas. You can lay there and cry if you need to. Like, we're just going to make sure you're okay. He's like, we will take care of you. Like, we will drive you back to your hotel when you're done and you're ready to not be around people. But I just don't want you to be alone tonight.
That's
And
great.
right? And I showed up and was like, thank you. There were no expectations of me. I didn't have to choose that I wanted to eat. I didn't have to, make any decisions. And I did. I literally laid on his couch under a blanket while him and his wife did their thing and their son was tootling around. And, I just laid there and like watched whatever was on the TV and it felt so safe. And I don't know about you, but we often hide how bad it is and we hide where we're at with our health so that we never feel like we're too much for people.
Yeah. And yeah, it's difficult, isn't it, communicating about health, especially like with people that are close to us, but also people who are that little bit further away. I'm thinking about just like when a colleague says like, "Hi, how are you?" which
Yeah,
should be a completely innocent question, but
should
you
be.
know, there would be days where like either I'm thinking I don't have the energy
Yeah,
um to say yes, I'm fine, because I'm not fine. I just
yeah,
want to shout at you all the things that are wrong with me.
right.
Or but at the same time also I don't have the energy uh to not lie and to, you know, go into all of the detail as well. So yeah, it manifests in lots of different ways. But I had a similar friend actually who let me just go to his house and sort of crash there, because I was at work. It was in
Yeah.
2018, so around the time of um my second and third diagnoses. And I was at work and I got like a phone call or some news or something that upset me. And I talked to my manager and she was like, "Do you want to go home?" And I said, "Yeah." So instead of going home, I went to a supermarket to pick up some lunch, and then I went to my friend's house, and he only lived about 15 minutes away. And he was like, "Yeah, sure, come over. I'm going to a job interview soon, but you can just hang at my house." So I went over to his house. I told him a little bit about what was happening. We hung out for a bit, and then he went to his job interview, and I just sat alone in his house, which, thinking about it now, was just a little bit weird. But I played on his guitar a little bit. I just sort of tried to have a nap on the couch and just waited for him to come home, and then we went to the pub and had a drink.
Right. It was funny, like talking about it. And even that night, like it was probably weird that he invited me over to do that, but it felt so good. Right. So, okay. So, closing off this area of this, because then I want to dive into something more fun in this whole situation or quirky about both of us. For anyone listening who has a friend with a health issue, what do you recommend? What do you recommend for the significant others or the friends of someone who is in a situation like yours or a situation like mine or dealing with a health issue where there is a lot of like future fear, current fear, right? And also just like so much unknown. What do you recommend for them on how to support?
I think the problem with communication is that sometimes there's a lot of guessing, and
Yeah.
maybe it's a good idea to just ask the person, like, "Do you want to talk about this? Do you want advice on this? Do you want to be distracted? And should we just talk about something else or do something
Yeah.
else?" Um, Especially when like it's in the thick of it. So like just after surgery or something, when somebody's recovering for something or going through treatment, then like sending messages. Again, this is something that my friend, the same friend, did, sending messages and explicitly saying, "You don't have to reply to this. There's no expectation from
Yeah.
my end for you to contribute. I'm just telling you about my day, or I'm just checking in, hope you're okay." um yeah, I think that was really nice, and it's along the similar lines, isn't it? Yeah, just come and chill at my house is it's like the text equivalent of that.
Oh, totally. And I think the one thing I would add to it is I had people actually get upset with me for not staying in good enough contact with them and telling them what was going on and including them in things and incorporating them into that side of my world at that point. And that was really hard. And I remember after when someone was like, "I heard you were here nonstop for medical treatments." And I said, "Yeah, I was." And it was really interesting. The comment that came out of their mouth shouldn't have shocked me, but it did. They were like, "And you didn't even call me?" And I
What?
remember just, I was like, "No, no, I didn't." And they're like, "Well, I thought we were friends." And I was like, "I'm pretty sure that I was spending my time in medical treatments because my body was shutting down and I felt like I was dying. And I didn't have any capacity for people, right?
Right.
I had no capacity for people. And I think that changes on where we draw our energy from, right? As an introvert, it decreased my capacity.
Mhm.
As an extrovert, it might increase someone's capacity to be like, I need people more, right? But I think, like, I know a lot of people really struggled with that with me because I've had conversations with people about it where I go internal, I cocoon. So when I'm going through something, you will stop hearing from me. When I'm going through something, I will not reach out. I will not ask for help. I'm not going to tell you I'm struggling. Like, that's not my natural go-to. My natural go-to is I just curl completely inward and go, okay, now I have to take care of me. And I don't actually care who's outside of that. Right. And it's not a rejection of the other person, right? It's not a rejection of you. It's me just trying to protect me in that moment.
Yeah.
And so to understand as a friend or a family member, like, what is your capacity? What can you handle? And if you don't have the capacity to send out a daily update on how you're doing, right? That's okay. It's okay that you don't have that capacity, and I'm not going to ask it of you.
But there's too many people to update anyway on a regular
Oh my
basis.
goodness. There were too many. And, it was interesting. The people that were like, hey, what do you need right now? And I'd be like, can you just check in on me like once a week? Just like send a prayer for me. Can you like,
Mhm.
you know, things like that. But I also had a friend that I remember one day there was like this crazy long day of IVs. Like I was there for almost 8 hours. And a friend called and she's like, can I just come and like sit with you? And I was like, yes, yes, you can. And she just like cracked jokes and we laughed and we talked and like I cried and she literally just like held my hand. And that was the most beautiful thing ever because she was like, hey, this is what I want to do. Are you okay with that?
It
And that
helps
was
when somebody
amazing.
comes with an idea of how to help rather than relying on you to,
Totally.
yeah.
What do you need? And you're like, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
My answer often was like coffee. I need a coffee. Can you just like people would laugh. They're like, that's it, that's all you need. I was like, I don't know what else to tell you. So now let's fast forward. How has having a diagnosis like that, cancer 3 times, knowing you're at such high risk, right? And all of these things and these shifts, how has it shifted your everyday life?
So people say don't let cancer define you and all of that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. I've kind of gone the other way.
Yeah.
I don't really like that sort of advice anyway for lots of different reasons. I don't like kind of being told that I might be doing it wrong somehow, as if there's a right and wrong way to do cancer.
To do cancer recovery. Oh, come on. There's a book, isn't there, that tells you how to do it perfectly? I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
um, so well, in early 2019, after I'd recovered, as I was recovering from my Whipple surgery, and I was just trying to fill life up with everything but the kitchen sink, I decided that I'd quite like to do a PhD.
Yeah.
And so I'm about to start year 5 of 6 of my part-time PhD.
Wow.
It is long. It's good. I'm enjoying it. Um, but yeah, so my PhD is in creative writing. So I'm writing poetry about my it started off being about my cancer experiences, but also it kind of morphed into, well, I'm a writer. I've always been a writer.
Yeah.
So naturally, I've been writing about cancer since about 2012 when I sort of started to get to grips with everything that had happened. So about 2020, when I was doing this PhD, came to the realization, I've been writing about cancer for about 8 years. Actually, maybe I don't want to do quite so much of that anymore.
Yeah.
But then the question becomes, well, who else am I apart from being a cancer survivor? And that became a difficult question to answer. But that's that kind of writing about identity and trying to explore that. My PhD is not just a PhD anymore because of that. It's a whole like exploration of myself. So that's that's kind of the main thing, really. I mean, plus talking to people like this on podcasts and blogging and writing books. And it's quite funny, since in the time between we had this initial conversation about me coming on and talking to you,
Yeah.
and today for me coming on and talking to you, I decided I wanted to write another book. I wrote another book, and it's coming out on the 2nd of September
Oh
because I
my
work very
goodness.
fast now.
You do. That's incredible. Okay, so we will put a link. I'm going to get you to send me the link
Okay.
for that book for where people can find it. And we are 100% going to put that in the show notes. So, do you think it speeds you up, slows you down? Does it make you try different things? Like
I think it's
I'm often kind of spontaneous, right? Because I'm like,
yeah,
but I should be dead. So today's borrowed time and I'm gonna have fun.
that's it. And it wasn't until recently, because and it's kind of what my second book is about, is kind of going from denial to acceptance, because it has taken me a long time to accept that I have CMMRD.
Yeah.
Because just a couple of years ago I wouldn't even be saying the words, I'd be just trying not to think about it. um but yeah, so it's been a long time trying to come to terms with all of it. And it's yeah, it's definitely made me more spontaneous, I think. I mean, there's a few things that I've done that I probably wouldn't have done if I hadn't had cancer. And just kind of knowing about CMMRD and the statistics, because
Yeah.
the average person with CMMRD gets their first cancer diagnosis at 7.5 years old.
Wow.
So a lot of children, unfortunately, don't make it, because a
Yeah.
lot of it is brain tumors, and there's a high sort of recurrence and things like that. So it is kind of thinking, well, I could say I'll do such and such one day. Oh yeah, I'd like to do that maybe one day. Isn't really in my vocabulary anymore.
Yeah.
Because what is one day? That's nothing, that doesn't really mean anything. What if one day never comes? What about today? So that's why I've done things like been in a hot air balloon. I did a fire walk one year. That was quite cool.
Very cool. I've done it. It's amazing. I
it's good,
highly
isn't it?
recommend it. I highly recommend it to everyone. Do a fire walk at some point in your life.
Did yours have like a really kind of motivational like speech and kind of team building thing before you did it to
Yeah.
get you? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's cool.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. It is so cool.
Yeah, I love that. I got the idea from watching The Office,
Hmm.
because this is my favorite TV show, and I watched them doing a fire walk in one episode, and I was like, I want to do that. I'm gonna do that. And that was it. I found somewhere that was doing it. I was like, yep, that's it. I'm doing it. Sorted.
That is awesome. So, one last thing, and then I will let you go. I know it's very late at night there right now. You mentioned earlier about the whole identity thing and the and I mean I see this all the time. I'm sure you see this all the time is people have a diagnosis and then they own it. It's like they wear it like a cape and it's who they are and what they are, not what happened to them and what's created who they are.
Mm.
And I will admit I've been guilty of that a lot in my life myself, right? How You talked about the fact that you don't like when people say that, right? To not own that and not identify as that. Can you explain that a little bit? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that definitely sounds like me, to be honest. Somebody who's just sort of taken it and kind of took ownership of it, and I guess made it who I am, but I guess in a positive way. And I suppose if you do that, then it's fine. I mean, essentially, there's no doing things right or wrong at the end of the day, is there? We're all just desperately trying to get by as
Yeah.
best we can. Um, yeah, I don't really like when people say, "Oh, don't let it define you," um, because it kind of makes it sound like I don't have control, or I do have control. I think it makes it sound like I do have control over the situation, and sometimes with cancer, you just don't.
Yeah.
Um, and and yeah, again, I don't want to be told that I'm doing it wrong. I think that I have harnessed it in a positive way, but I do often think, what would life be like if it wasn't for that? What would I be doing right now? Because I work for a bowel disease charity,
Mm-hmm.
and that came about because of my patient experiences. So that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have had cancer. I wouldn't be, well, I might be doing my PhD now, but it wouldn't be in my cancer experiences. It would be, I've no idea, something else. So, and it's the thing as well, when people say, "Oh, you're so like brave," or "You inspire me," um "I think you're amazing," all of this sort of stuff, and it's like, I haven't done anything inspirational. If you're just talking about my illness, I've done nothing. I've done what I was told to do by the doctors. I've just existed. Don't compliment me for existing. But
That
actually,
is so interesting. Okay, yes, yes. Keep going.
I think that it's what you do with it. It's like, yeah, okay, I don't think that I'm brave or anything for
Yeah.
having gone through an illness experience. What I do think is brave is when I and other people take our illness experience and we talk about it, we write about it,
Yeah.
we try to make other people feel better by sharing our experiences, we create something beautiful out of it, we create anything that we're happy with, writing, drawing, crafting, whatever it is, and just try to spin something positive out of it. I think that those are things that people should be commended for. You get no credit for living. That's a quote from somebody, but I can't remember who it is. There's a writer who was talking about writing memoir,
Yeah.
and she was just saying, you can't just write um, your story kind of from beginning to end as it happened. It's like, what is the actual story within that? What's the angle? What did you take from it? You know, you don't get any credit for living the story. You get credit for what you do with it afterwards, I guess.
I love that so much. It's sorry, it hit me in the feels when you said that in a good way of often when people are like, I don't know how you've survived. I don't know how you've done what you've done to even be here. I'm like, I just did. I just kept living, right? What I am so proud of is how hard I have fought to be who I am, right? How I've turned and how you've turned these things that we've been through into something beautiful, right? Into something that can inspire someone or help somebody or be something amazing. And thank you for that. Thank you for that. Because I think it's so true. I think it's so true is, you know, I think of this every day. And when you and I first had our initial conversation, it's like, man, someone who's been through so much and you've turned it around. You didn't just curl up and die, right? Like you didn't take that as your identity as like you're the cancer girl. And now that's it. And you've curled up and died within that and just suffered within that. And it's been a pity thing or a victim thing. You took that and you wrote about it. You're turning it into, your job and your career and your future and all of those things. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for sharing that with the rest of us.
Oh, thanks for giving me the opportunity to, yeah, come on. It's always really good to talk to somebody who just gets this kind of thing.
Oh, more than I care to admit. I probably talked too much in today's episode, is what I get told. And that's okay. Honestly, like, I love the conversation that we just had and how we both get it. We both
Yeah.
just get it. And I don't know, we're part of this like weird club we don't want to be part of. And that's
Yeah.
okay. It's okay because we're doing cool things with it. So I want to thank you again so much, like so much, Sam, for hanging out today. Thank you, listeners, for being here. And if you are owning your identity, if you are owning something that's happened in your life, it's not about doing it right or wrong. It's not about any of that. It's what are you going to do with it? How are you going to use it? It could be a gift or it could be a curse. It's a double-edged sword either way. So what are you going to do with it? So if you want to find Miss Sam, check out the show notes located at thetailorway.ca, and you can find a link for her new book. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited. I will be ordering it. And for all of her other stuff, find where she's published, read her poetry, support her, love on her. I know that it's always very appreciated when you guys connect with our guests. Join us again in 2 weeks for another fun topic or hard topic. I mean, that's what the podcast is about. But honestly, share this episode to someone you know who has dealt with cancer, has dealt with a health issue that's really felt like they've lost their identity through it, so they can feel seen and heard and understood. Subscribe now on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you love the show, please leave a rating and review. Thank you so much, guys. See you in a couple weeks.